Ethan woke up shivering so hard that he could not feel his hands or feet, and at first he thought he was still lying in the snow, where his ship had crashed, but slowly his eyes adjusted to the dim light of a small fire and the warmth of a rough blanket around his shoulders told him that he was not outside anymore. He blinked several times, his breath catching as he looked around. The tiny hut made from strange wooden poles and woven leaves, and in the corner of the hut he saw her, the alien girl. She sat quietly watching him, her large dark eyes reflecting the flicker of the firelight, and for a moment he could not tell if she was friend or foe. Her face was smooth and pale, with faint markings running along her jaw, and her hair fell in soft dark strands around her shoulders. She looked young and small, maybe no older than a human teenager, yet there was something about the way she held herself that felt strong and steady. Ethan tried to sit up, but pain shot through his ribs, and he groaned softly. The girl moved quickly to his side, her hands cool and gentle as she pressed him back onto the rough bedding. She said something in a language he could not understand, and when he frowned, she tried again in broken human speech. "You hurt, stay still." She placed a small wooden cup of warm liquid to his lips, and he hesitated for a moment, but the heat of the drink was too tempting, and he sipped it slowly. It was bitter and sweet at the same time, and warmth spread through his chest, easing the cold inside his body. He tried to ask her who she was and why she had saved him, but she only shook her head and pointed to the fire as if to say he needed to rest instead of asking questions. He wanted to thank her, but she seemed distant, her gaze often shifting to the door of the hut, as if she was listening for something outside. Every few minutes, Ethan noticed a faint light glowing beneath the sleeves of her clothing, a soft bluish glow that seemed to pulse with her heartbeat. When he looked directly at it, she would quickly hide her arms behind her back, as if she did not want him to see. Wind outside howled against the walls of the hut, and Ethan thought of the crash, the sudden violent storm that had torn his ship apart, in the freezing night that had almost killed him. He wondered how this girl had found him in time, and why she had bothered to drag a stranger to safety when she could have left him to die. She did not look dangerous, but he had been alone long enough to know that appearances could be deceiving. Hours passed slowly as the fire burned lower, and Ethan's strength began to return a little. He tried again to speak to her, asking about the planet where they were, and if there was a way to send a signal for rescue, but she gave no answers, only soft words in her strange language, and sometimes a small shake of her head. Finally she sat down near the doorway and kept her eyes fixed on the dark forest beyond the hut. It felt to Ethan as though she was waiting for something or someone, and that thought unsettled him. When he finally drifted back into uneasy sleep, he could still see her sitting there in the shadows, her face calm but unreadable, and the faint blue glow from her markings casting strange shapes on the hut walls. He felt a quiet gratitude for her kindness, but deep in his chest there was also a growing sense of unease, as if the alien girl who had saved his life was not as simple and innocent as she seemed. And though he did not yet know why, he could not shake the feeling that this rescue would come at a price. Ethan woke the next morning with the weak light of the planet's twin suns filtering through the gaps in the hut walls, and for a brief moment he thought he was back on Earth in some remote forest cabin. But then he saw the alien girl crouched near the fire pit, stirring the embers with a carved stick, and reality came rushing back to him. His ship was gone. He was stranded on a world he did not know, and the only thing keeping him alive was this mysterious girl who had pulled him from certain death. He sat up, slowly, his ribs aching but less than before, and he saw that someone had carefully bound his wounds with clean strips of fabric, and he had no doubt it had been her work. When she noticed he was awake, she offered him a bowl of something that smelled like a stew made from roots and thin strips of meat. It was strange to look at, but hunger won over hesitation, and he ate while she sat silently watching him, her big eyes giving away no clear emotions. She tried to speak again in her broken human language, using simple words. "Stay warm, stay close." She pointed to the fire, and then to the door, and made a gesture as if warning him not to wander outside alone. Ethan nodded, But his mind was already restless. He could not stay in this hut forever. He needed to understand where he was and how he could send a signal for help. As the day went on, the girl showed him around the small clearing where the hut stood. Tall alien trees with twisted trunks surrounded them, their leaves shimmering like metal in the breeze, and in the distance strange bird-like creatures made haunting cries. The girl moved quietly and with purpose as she gathered herbs and small fruits from nearby bushes. She seemed to know the forest well, and Ethan followed her carefully, noting how she avoided certain paths, as though there were dangers he could not see. At one point she stopped and knelt to touch a cluster of glowing plants, their light soft and blue like the markings he had seen on her arms before. When he asked about them, she only looked at him with a guarded expression and said in her broken words, "No touch, no safe." Before moving on, this made Ethan even more curious, and he began to pay closer attention to every little thing about her. She carried tools made from materials he did not recognize, and he realized they were too advanced to belong to someone living a simple life in the forest. That night, as they returned to the hut, he could not stop thinking about the secrets she seemed to keep. She moved like someone who had been trained, her eyes scanning the shadows with quiet alertness, and once when he asked if there were others like her, she looked away and changed the subject. Ethan started to suspect that she was hiding more than just a few personal details, and he wondered if she might know something about the fate of his ship or the chances of rescue. Later, after he lay down to rest, he heard her voice softly speaking in a language he did not understand. He opened his eyes and saw her near the fire holding a small device in her hand. It was sleek and metallic, nothing like the handmade tools in the hut. She spoke quickly and quietly, as if sending a message to someone far away. When she noticed Ethan awake, she slipped the device into a pouch and smiled at him. But there was tension in her smile that made his stomach tighten. Ethan could not sleep after that moment. He replayed everything in his mind, her glowing markings, her skill with tools, the strange device, the way she avoided questions. She had saved his life, but he was starting to think she had her own reasons, and they might not be the same as his. Her kindness felt real, but at the same time, it felt like a mask covering something deeper, something he could not yet see. He wanted to believe she was simply good, but he knew enough about survival to trust his instincts. And they told him to stay cautious. The wind howled outside the hut as Ethan lay awake, staring at the ceiling, his mind full of questions. He had no answers, for he knew he needed her help if he wanted to live, but he also knew he had to find out the truth about her before it was too late, because something about the alien girl who had saved him just did not feel as innocent as it looked on the surface. Ethan woke before dawn the next day. The fire in the hut had burned low, and the air was cold enough to make his breath visible. He could hear the alien girl moving softly outside the hut as if she was trying not to wake him, and that made his heart pound with suspicion. He stayed still for a moment, listening to the faint rustle of leaves and the crunch of footsteps. Then he decided he could not wait any longer. He needed answers, and he needed them soon. He rose carefully, wrapping the rough blanket around his shoulders, and stepped outside. The clearing was quiet except for the distant calls of strange birds and the soft hum of the wind through the tall alien trees. He saw the girl a short distance away, crouched near a cluster of bushes with her back to him. She was holding the small metallic device he had seen the night before, and whispering into it in that same language he could not understand. Her voice was urgent, her posture tense, as if she was afraid of being overheard. Ethan moved closer without making a sound, but when he stepped on a dry twig, she spun around her. Eyes wide with alarm, she quickly hid the device and approached him with a forced smile, saying something in her broken human words, "Food now, eat." But Ethan was no longer convinced by her soft voice. He asked her what she had been doing, and who she had been speaking to, but she only shook her head and pointed back to the hut as if insisting he return. Ethan knew she was lying, and he realized that if he wanted the truth, he would have to find it himself. Later, when she left to gather more supplies, he decided to search the area around the hut. He walked carefully, scanning the ground for anything unusual, And soon he found a narrow path half hidden by roots and vines. It led deeper into the forest, and he followed it, his heart racing with every step. The path ended at a mound of earth that looked ordinary at first, but when he pushed aside the leaves, he found a narrow opening leading down into darkness. He hesitated only a moment before climbing down. The tunnel was damp and cold, and it opened into a large underground chamber, dimly lit by glowing crystals in the walls. Ethan's breath caught in his throat as he looked around the room. There were tables covered with alien tools and data, consoles blinking softly, and in the corner he saw human objects, pieces of ships, uniforms, and even personal belongings. Some looked like they had been here for years. He stepped closer and saw a holographic display flicker to life above one of the consoles. It showed images of humans, including himself. His crash site was marked on a map of the planet, and there were notes in the alien language. He could not read. His hands trembled as he realized this was not just a hiding place. It was a research facility, and the alien girl was part of it. Ethan's mind raced with questions. Was she the only one, or were there others on the planet? Had she saved him only to use him for whatever purpose this place served? He remembered how she always avoided his questions, how she seemed too skilled and too prepared for someone living alone in a forest, and now it all made sense. She was not who she had pretended to be. Suddenly he heard movement behind him. He turned quickly and saw her standing at the entrance to the chamber, her eyes full of something he could not read. She did not look surprised to find him here. She looked sad, as if she had known this moment would come. She stepped forward slowly and held out her hands as if to calm him, saying softly in her broken human words, "Not hurt. You please listen." But Ethan could not stay calm now. He demanded to know why she had saved him and why she had been hiding this place from him. His voice echoed through the chamber, and the girl flinched. At his anger, she tried to explain, but her words were broken and unclear. She spoke of orders and missions, and things he could not fully understand. All he knew was that he was part of something bigger, something dangerous. When she reached out to him, he stepped back, his eyes scanning the room for any way to protect himself. He saw his distress beacon lying on one of the tables. The one she had claimed was broken, and he realized she had taken it from him all along. Rage and fear mixed in his chest as he grabbed the beacon and held it close. The girl's expression changed from sadness to desperation. She moved closer, shaking her head and trying to tell him something important. But Ethan could barely hear her over the pounding of his heart. He felt trapped and betrayed, and he did not know if he could trust a single word she said anymore. Ethan's hands tightened around the distress beacon as the alien girl stepped closer, her dark eyes wide with a mixture of fear and determination. She tried to reach for him, but he pulled away, his voice rough with anger and confusion, as he demanded that she tell him the truth. No more lies. He shouted, no more half answers. He wanted to know why she had saved him and why she had hidden this place from him. The girl stopped a few steps away, her hands still raised as if to show she meant no harm. And then in her broken human language, she began to speak slowly. She told him she had been sent here long ago by her people. Her mission was to observe humans, to study them, to collect information about the ones who had crashed on this world. She admitted that there had been others before him, and when Ethan's chest tightened with dread, she nodded with a pained look in her eyes and said that those humans had not survived, but she insisted she had not killed them. They had died in the hostile environment or from injuries, and her faction had only taken what was left to learn more. Ethan felt cold inside. Even though the air in the chamber was warm, he thought of the human belongings scattered around the room, the uniforms and tools, the faces he had seen on the holographic display. He wanted to believe she had not harmed them, but it was hard to know what was true anymore. He asked her if she planned to hand him over to her people, and she hesitated. That tiny pause was enough for him to know the answer was not simple. She said softly that she had orders to send for them, that they were already on their way here, and Ethan's heart began to pound. He could imagine alien ships, arriving any moment ready to take him away and vanish him forever. The girl stepped closer, pleading, now asking him to trust her for just a little longer. She said she did not want to obey those orders anymore. She had grown to care for him, and she wanted to help him escape. But Ethan could not bring himself to move. Sound of engines in the distance made them both freeze. Ethan recognized it immediately, even though he had never heard such ships before. A low hum that grew louder with each passing second. The alien faction was close. The girl looked at him desperately and told him they had to go now. She grabbed his arm and pulled him toward a hidden exit tunnel leading deeper into the forest. But Ethan resisted, unsure if this was another trap. She stopped and looked directly into his eyes, her expression fierce. She told him he could either stay and be captured or trust her one last time. Her voice trembled as she said she would not betray him no matter what. Ethan's mind raced. He remembered the times she had cared for him, the times she had watched over him while he slept, and he wanted to believe her. But the fear of what might happen if he was wrong nearly paralyzed him. The sound of ships landing outside the forest forced his choice. He ran with her through the tunnel, his heart hammering as branches scraped against his skin, and the glow of the alien markings on her arms lit the narrow path ahead. When they emerged into the night, the forest was alive with lights from search drones sweeping across the trees. They could hear alien voices shouting in the distance, and the girl pulled him down into a shallow ravine, urging him to stay quiet. As the drones passed overhead, Ethan's chest heaved with every breath, and he whispered, asking her what the plan was, how they could possibly escape. The ship, she told him, she had disabled part of their scanning equipment to buy time, but it would not last forever. They needed to reach an old landing site deep in the mountains where she had hidden a small craft she could use to get him off the planet. As they moved quickly through the forest, the noise of the alien faction searching for them grew louder and closer. At one point, a pair of soldiers appeared ahead, their glowing weapons raised. The girl pushed Ethan behind a tree and attacked with speed and precision, her movements so sharp and practiced that Ethan was stunned. She fought them with a silent fury, and within moments they were down. She did not look proud or relieved, only sad, as if each strike weighed heavy on her. Ethan followed her deeper into the forest until his legs burned with exhaustion. He could tell she was weakening too, but she did not stop. Finally, they reached a narrow trail leading into the mountains, and she told him they were almost there. But even as she spoke, a bright light swept across the path, and the roar of engines filled the air. A larger alien ship was descending directly in front of them, cutting off their escape. The girl grabbed Ethan's hand and pulled him behind a cluster of rocks. As the ship landed, she whispered that there was no more time. They would have to fight their way through. She looked at him with an expression he could not read and said softly that she was sorry for everything. Ethan wanted to ask what she meant, but before he could, the ship doors opened and soldiers poured out, surrounding the area. The girl stepped forward, her body tense, ready to face them, and Ethan realized that whatever happened next would decide everything. Alien soldiers stepped forward in a tight formation, their weapons glowing with a cold blue light that reflected on the window wet stones of the mountain path. Ethan's heart pounded so hard he could hear nothing else for a moment. The alien girl stood in front of him, her slender frame tense as a bowstring, her glowing markings pulsing brighter than ever before. She raised her hands slowly as if surrendering, but Ethan could see the way her eyes shifted, scanning the soldiers for any weakness. One of the soldiers stepped closer, speaking in the alien language with a voice that was commanding and sharp. The girl responded softly, her words quick and urgent. Ethan could not understand a single word, but he could sense the weight in their tones. It felt like a negotiation. The soldier's voice grew louder, more forceful, and the girl took a small step backward. She turned her head just slightly, and Ethan could see the fear in her eyes. She whispered to him in broken human words, "When I move, you run. Do not look back." Before Ethan could reply, she dropped to one knee, and a blast of bright light shot from her hand, striking the ground in front of the soldiers. The explosion of energy threw them off balance, and Ethan felt her grab his arm with surprising strength, pulling him toward the side of the mountain path. They ran as more blasts lit up the night behind them. The sound of alien voices shouting orders filling the forest. The girl pushed Ethan ahead her body, shielding him from stray fire. They crashed through a thicket and reached a narrow slope that led upward. She told him the ship was just beyond the ridge, but her voice was weakening. Ethan could see blood seeping from a wound on her side, where one of the blasts had grazed her. She ignored the pain, forcing herself to move faster. Ethan tried to help her, but she pushed him forward, saying no time. You must live. The ridge was steep and the rocks slippery, but Ethan climbed with everything he had. When they reached the top, he saw a small craft hidden beneath a canopy of alien vines, its surface battered and worn, but still functional. The girl stumbled toward it and began pressing commands into the control panel. A soft hum filled the air as the craft powered up, but they could already hear the soldiers climbing the ridge behind them. Ethan turned to her, asking what they should do next, but she looked at him with a sad smile and handed him the distress beacon. She told him to take the ship alone, that she would stay behind to stop the soldiers. Ethan refused, shaking his head and telling her they could both make it. But she only touched his shoulder gently and said, I cannot. They will follow you if I go. I will hold them here. You must go. Tears burned in Ethan's eyes. He wanted to argue, but there was no time. The soldiers were already close enough that he could see the glow of their weapons through the trees. The girl stepped away from him, her body glowing brighter than ever, and whispered a final word of thanks for trusting her, at least this far. Then she turned and walked toward the ridge, her hands lighting up with raw energy. Ethan climbed into the small craft, his hands trembling as he worked the controls. The engines roared to life, and he could see her fighting the soldiers with everything she had. Blasts of light streaking across the night sky. He wanted to stay to help, but he knew she was right. If he stayed, they would both die. He pulled the lever, and the craft shot upward into the sky, the trees and mountains shrinking beneath him as the planet's atmosphere faded behind the craft. Ethan activated the distress beacon, hoping that someone somewhere would pick up the signal. He stared out the window at the shrinking world below, thinking of the alien girl who had saved him twice now, once when she pulled him from the snow, and again when she sacrificed herself so he could escape. He did not know if she had truly cared for him or if she had simply followed her own sense of duty, but he felt a deep ache in his chest, knowing he would never see her again. Hours later, a human rescue ship intercepted the beacon and pulled Ethan aboard. He was safe at last, but as he sat in the quiet med bay of the ship, he could not shake the images of her from his mind, the way she had looked at him before, turning back to face her people, the way she had fought with such fierce strength and silent sorrow. He knew the galaxy would never know her name or what she had done for him, but he would remember for as long as he lived. Ethan looked out the window of the rescue ship as stars streaked past and whispered a silent promise to the girl who had saved his life. Though she was not who she had pretended to be, she had given him hope when he had none, and that hope would guide him wherever his journey took him next. The end.